Before the idea of money, people lived by trade. If you grew grain and I caught fish, we traded food to survive. It worked, but only when both sides wanted what the other had. If I needed shoes and the shoemaker didn't eat fish, I had a problem. Barter was limited, slow, and confusing. People needed a common way to measure value, something that everyone trusted and recognized. At first, different cultures tried all sorts of things. In some islands, people used large stone wheels. In ancient China, shells were used as early tokens. In parts of Africa, salt was money. That's where the word salary comes from. But every system had a flaw. Stones were heavy. Shells were common in some places, but rare in others. Salt could dissolve or spoil. People needed something better, something that felt permanent. Then they noticed metals. Copper could be shaped into tools. Silver shined in the moonlight. But one metal stood above all others: gold. It was rare, but not too rare. It was soft enough to shape, but strong enough to last forever. It didn't rust or fade. And it had a natural glow that felt magical. Every culture that found gold gave it a spiritual meaning. In Egypt, gold was called the flesh of the gods. Pharaohs wore it to show they were chosen by heaven. Gold decorated temples, thrones, and tombs. It symbolized eternity. When the Egyptians buried their kings, they buried them with gold to guide them to the afterlife. The message was simple. Gold equals power, and power equals life. In Mesopotamia, gold became tribute. If you wanted to show loyalty to a ruler, you brought gold. In ancient China, it marked rank and honor. The higher your position, the more gold you could display. Even in early South American civilizations, gold appeared in rituals long before Europeans arrived. No one told these cultures to agree, yet they all did. Gold was universal. It became the language of value before languages were written down. At first, gold was just decoration. People wore it, offered it, and worshipped it. Then, slowly, it turned into a tool for trade. When merchants needed a way to store wealth, gold became their choice. You could melt it, divide it, and carry it easily. A small amount could buy large things. That was new. Temples and palaces became the first vaults. Rulers stored gold not only to protect it, but to control it. If you wanted to borrow or trade, you went to the temple. The priests or officials kept records of how much gold you deposited or owed. That was the first idea of a bank. Religion, government, and money were born together. Each one relied on belief. People believed in gods, they believed in kings, and soon they believed in gold. Over centuries, the system grew. Goldsmiths began to keep gold for customers and issue paper receipts. Those receipts could be traded instead of the gold itself. If you trusted the goldsmith, you could spend the paper like real money. That simple habit planted the seed for what money would become. A promise based on trust. But before coins, before banks, before credit, it was still about the metal, the weight, the shine, the feel. Gold didn't just measure wealth. It became wealth itself. If you held it, you held security. If you owned enough of it, you could command others. The truth spread everywhere humans settled. Think about what this means. Before any law or country existed, people already understood one basic rule. Value comes from belief, and belief needs a symbol. Gold became that symbol because it seemed unchanging. It looked the same generation after generation. It linked people through time. That's why archaeologists today still find gold that looks untouched after thousands of years. Iron turns to dust, bronze fades, but gold shines as if it was made yesterday. Imagine what that meant to ancient minds. It was proof that some things never die. Gold gave humans a sense of stability in a world of chaos. As trade routes grew between regions, gold traveled with merchants. Caravans carried it across deserts. Ships sailed with it across seas. It connected cultures that had never met. A trader in India could recognize the value of gold from Africa without speaking a word. That silent agreement made global trade possible long before globalization had a name. But gold did something deeper than fuel trade. It changed how people thought about time. A harvest lasted one season, a tool lasted a few years, but gold lasted forever. Owning gold meant storing the future. It allowed savings, inheritance, and planning. Ideas that created civilization itself. You could pass gold to your children, and it would still hold value. It became a bridge between generations. Gold also reshaped power. Before gold, power came from land or muscle. With gold, power could be stored, hidden, or moved. A ruler could lose a battle, but keep his gold and rebuild. A merchant could travel with wealth in a pouch instead of a wagon. Gold made power portable, and that changed everything. By the time the first cities formed, gold had already built a new kind of society, one based on stored value, written records, and organized trade. Markets appeared, taxes followed, and kingdoms rose around gold-rich lands. Human ambition had found its favorite fuel. When you look at gold today, in a ring, in a vault, or on a digital chart, you're looking at 5,000 years of human faith condensed into metal. From the start, it wasn't about shiny things. It was about trust. Gold was the first shared language of value. It taught us to believe in symbols, and that belief would one day become the global economy. This was the world before money, before paper, before code, a world where a single yellow metal carried the hopes, fears, and dreams of every civilization. Gold didn't just survive history. Gold made history possible. Gold didn't just shape early trade, it built empires. Once people discovered how to melt, weigh, and stamp it, gold stopped being only treasure. It became a system that could run armies, buy loyalty, and rule continents. The story begins around 2,600 years ago in a small kingdom called Lydia. Located in what's now western Turkey, the Lydians created something the world had never seen before: standardized coins. They mixed gold and silver into a metal called electrum, pressed it into small discs, and stamped each one with the image of a roaring lion, the symbol of their king. That tiny stamp carried a powerful idea. This coin is real. Its value is guaranteed by the crown. With that one invention, trust became portable. You didn't have to test every piece of gold. The stamp did it for you. Trade became faster. Merchants could count instead of weigh, and people from different lands could agree on price instantly. The Lydian coins spread across the ancient world, and every great civilization copied it. Persians, Greeks, Romans, all adopted the same logic. Control the coin, control the people. In Persia, King Darius minted the daric, a coin so pure and consistent that it powered one of the largest empires on earth. Greek city-states struck their own versions. Athens with its famous owl coin, a symbol of wisdom and wealth. And when Alexander the Great conquered Persia, he didn't just take their gold, he took their minting system. Everywhere his armies went, new coins appeared bearing his face. Gold had become propaganda. It told people who ruled them, even if they never met their ruler. Then came Rome. Rome turned money into a weapon of empire. At its height, the Roman denarius traveled from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to India. Soldiers were paid in it, taxes were collected in it, and trade was measured by it. The entire economy of the Mediterranean beat to one rhythm, the rhythm of Roman silver and gold. But power breeds temptation. Emperors learned they could stretch their wealth by cheating their coins. They mixed cheaper metals like copper into the gold and silver. It looked the same, but the value dropped. At first, people didn't notice. Then prices rose, savings lost meaning, and trust began to crack. Inflation, a word they didn't yet know, started to destroy the empire from the inside. Historians say Rome didn't fall in a single day. It eroded coin by coin. By the time the empire split, the currency was almost worthless. Merchants demanded payment in pure gold again, soldiers rebelled for higher pay, and the once mighty economy turned fragile. The great experiment of empire had proven a permanent truth. When money loses trust, power collapses. After Rome's fall, gold scattered across kingdoms and tribes. But its influence didn't fade, it just went underground. In the East, Byzantium kept minting gold coins called solidus for more than 700 years. It became the most stable currency of the Middle Ages. When traders saw a solidus, they accepted it without question. The emperor's seal meant it was real, and that was enough. Meanwhile, in the Islamic world, gold took on a new name, the dinar. It became the lifeblood of trade from Spain to India. Markets in Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba used gold coins that were accepted from one end of the empire to the other. Islamic scholars even wrote early books about economics and honest trade, showing that money wasn't just metal, it was morality. Across Europe, kings, knights, and merchants chased gold through war and trade. They built castles with it, decorated cathedrals with it, and taxed peasants for it. In Venice and Florence, banking families like the Medicis turned gold into finance. They kept gold for clients, wrote letters of credit, and funded voyages. Their gold-powered art, science, and exploration, it created a new class, the rich without crowns. But gold didn't just move peacefully, it drove conquest. When explorers set sail in the 1400s, they weren't just chasing adventure, they were chasing gold. Christopher Columbus wrote in his diary that whoever had gold could do whatever they wanted in the world. That single thought explains the next 5 centuries. Spain found mountains of gold in the Americas. They melted it down, shipped it home, and flooded Europe with it. At first, it made Spain rich. But soon, prices skyrocketed. Inflation hit again, just like in Rome. Too much gold made gold itself lose value. Empires learned another lesson. Even treasure can turn toxic when greed multiplies it. Meanwhile, England and France learned to use gold strategically. They created mints, controlled coin supply, and tied national power directly to precious metal reserves. Wars were fought not just for land, but for mines. The colonies became gold engines, places to dig, melt, and send wealth back home. The more gold a nation had, the stronger its army, its navy, its influence. In India, the Mughal Empire gathered gold through trade and tribute. In China, the Ming Dynasty hoarded silver and gold to balance their vast internal markets. In Africa, empires like Mali and Ghana became legends for their golden wealth. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca was so rich that it crashed local economies along the way. Everywhere gold appeared, history accelerated. It built cities, bankrolled wars, and crowned rulers. It was more than money. It was the bloodstream of civilization. But this system had one weakness: scarcity. Gold was hard to find, slow to mine, and limited in quantity. As populations grew, trade needed more liquidity. Nations couldn't expand fast enough using only what the earth provided. That problem set the stage for something new: paper promises, backed by gold. By the late medieval era, goldsmiths issued receipts for deposits. Those papers began to circulate like currency because people trusted they could be exchanged back for real gold. And once again, trust became the true currency. The metal itself mattered less than the belief behind it. From Lydia to Rome, from Spain to London, gold followed the same pattern: discovery, domination, debasement, collapse. Every empire rose on gold and fell when it lost faith in its money. Gold taught humanity a lesson we still forget. Wealth is never infinite, and power always costs belief. Even after 20 centuries, one thing stayed constant: gold outlasted every ruler who claimed to own it. It watched empires rise and fall, quietly waiting in vaults, temples, and tombs. When the maps changed and names disappeared, the gold remained, and it wasn't done shaping history. Because as the Middle Ages turned into the age of exploration, gold's next chapter began, one that would create banks, revolutions, and the modern world economy. Gold had built empires. Now it was about to build the system that ruled them all. When Rome collapsed, the world didn't lose gold. It just lost the order that controlled it. The roads broke, trade slowed, and kingdoms fought for survival. But underneath the chaos, gold quietly stayed the measure of power. Those who held it ruled. Those who didn't obeyed. Across Europe, gold became rare. People buried coins in the ground for safety and forgot them for centuries. Kings hoarded gold in castles. Churches decorated altars with it, calling it holy metal. To the people, gold was almost unreachable, a thing of the divine. It glittered on crowns and crosses, not in pockets. Still, trade needed something to move wealth between regions. Merchants began carrying gold and silver across dangerous roads, often risking their lives to protect it. Out of this danger came a new invention: trust-based banking. In cities like Venice, Florence, and Genoa, rich merchant families offered a service. They would hold your gold in their vaults and give you a written note that proved how much you had. That note could be traded with others. Instead of carrying heavy coins, you carried paper. If both sides trusted the banker's seal, the paper became as good as gold. That simple system created the first banks, and it changed everything. In Florence, the Medici family turned banking into empire. They lent gold to kings and popes, financed wars, and sponsored artists like Leonardo da Vinci. Their gold didn't just build cathedrals, it built the Renaissance. For the first time, money and culture moved together. Art, science, and architecture flourished because someone had the gold to fund it. Meanwhile, in the Islamic world, gold remained stable. The dinar and dirham were trusted from Spain to India. Muslim traders built vast trade routes connecting Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. In cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus, markets buzzed with gold coins, spices, and textiles. Knowledge moved with wealth: mathematics, astronomy, medicine, carried by merchants who trusted the weight of gold. They understood that real power was not in land, but in mobility. Then came a new force: the explorers. In the 1400s, Europe looked outward. The Crusades had opened trade routes, but now kings wanted control of the source, the gold mines themselves. They dreamed of new lands filled with treasure. They wanted gold, not only to trade, but to dominate. Portugal sailed first, mapping Africa's coast in search of gold and spices. Then Spain went west. When Columbus crossed the ocean, his letters were full of one word: gold. He promised his sponsors that there was endless wealth waiting to be taken. And soon he was right. The discovery of the Americas unleashed the greatest gold rush in history. The Spanish conquered the Aztec and Inca empires, melting centuries of art and culture into bars and coins. Ships loaded with gold and silver crossed the Atlantic every month. Spain became the richest empire on earth for a time, but history repeated its old trick. Too much gold caused inflation. Prices in Europe exploded, debts rose, and Spain's easy wealth turned into weakness. They spent their gold faster than they earned it, and other nations began to rise. England, France, and the Netherlands learned a different lesson. Instead of just hoarding gold, they built systems to multiply it. They founded national banks, issued bonds, and used gold as a base for paper money. Now gold didn't have to move. Paper could represent it. Trade grew faster, and empires became financial machines. Colonialism turned this idea global. Europe claimed territories in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, not just for land, but for resources and trade routes. Gold and silver flowed in one direction, toward Europe. Manufactured goods flowed the other way. The world economy was being built on gold, greed, and global trade. The British Empire perfected the model. They mined gold from South Africa, Australia, and India. They taxed colonies in gold and silver, using that wealth to finance the Royal Navy. The Navy then protected trade routes that brought even more wealth back home. It was a cycle of power, powered by metal. But gold was not only shaping nations, it was shaping ideas. Philosophers and scientists started to question why gold had value at all. It didn't feed anyone or build houses. Its power came from trust, from collective belief. The realization that money was a psychological invention changed how humanity saw economics. Gold was not just a resource. It was a story everyone agreed to believe. Still, belief alone wasn't enough to rule. Empires needed control, and that meant controlling the supply. They established central banks, institutions that held the nation's gold and managed its value. The Bank of England became the model, keeping gold reserves and issuing paper notes backed by it. That paper could circulate around the world, but the promise always pointed back to one truth. There is gold behind this. This trust fueled global trade. By the 1700s, merchants could travel from London to Calcutta, from Amsterdam to the Caribbean, and spend paper backed by gold. It was the world's first connected financial network. The age of empire wasn't only about armies and colonies. It was about who controlled gold, and through it, who controlled belief. In Africa, kingdoms like Mali and Ghana had already lived through their own golden ages. Mansa Musa, one of the richest men in history, carried so much gold on his pilgrimage to Mecca that he caused inflation across cities he passed. That single journey proved how gold could change entire economies overnight. It wasn't just metal, it was momentum. In Asia, China's demand for silver and gold shaped trade routes across the Pacific. European ships brought American silver to China in exchange for silk and tea. That flow of metal linked the East and West centuries before the internet connected them digitally. Gold and silver were the global languages of value, and everyone spoke them. By the 18th century, gold had woven itself into every part of human life, from crowns to coins, from banks to wars. It powered the Industrial Revolution by financing factories and railways. It built cities and toppled kingdoms, and as nations competed for dominance, the race for gold became a race for survival. But something new was forming beneath it all. The idea that money could exist beyond metal. Paper, credit, and trust were taking center stage. The world was about to enter the age of systems, where gold would sit quietly in the background, holding everything together, even when invisible. From the fall of Rome to the rise of London, gold had guided human ambition. It had turned trade into empire and belief into power. It connected the sacred and the secular, the past and the present. And now, as the 19th century dawned, gold was ready to evolve again. It would no longer just shine in crowns or coins. It would become the silent foundation of the modern financial world. Gold had ruled kings. Now it would rule nations. By the 1800s, the world had discovered a new rhythm. Industry, machines, trade, and empire. Steam engines crossed oceans. Factories filled cities, and banks became the heart of nations. But there was one question no one could escape. What gives money its power? Gold had always been the answer. Every empire, from Rome to Britain, trusted its weight more than any promise. But now, the world was changing too fast for metal alone to keep up. Trains, ships, and telegraphs moved faster than coins. Commerce needed something lighter, a system that could move value without carrying metal on every journey. The solution was simple, yet revolutionary: the gold standard. Instead of using gold for every transaction, nations decided that their paper money would represent a fixed amount of gold stored in their vaults. If you held a note that said £1, it meant that somewhere in the Bank of England, gold existed to back it. That promise, that link between paper and metal, created global trust. Britain led the way. By the mid-1800s, the British pound became the world's most stable currency because it was tied directly to gold. Traders across continents trusted it. If a British ship arrived in India or Africa or the Americas, its money had real weight behind it. Other countries followed. France, Germany, and eventually the United States. The world was entering the first true global financial system, and gold was the anchor. The gold standard made trade predictable. Exchange rates were stable, inflation stayed low, and international deals could last decades. A merchant in London could sell goods to Tokyo with confidence that the value of gold wouldn't change overnight. It was a golden age of certainty, or at least it seemed that way, but stability came with limits. If gold supply didn't grow fast enough, economies slowed down. Banks couldn't create more money than they had gold to back it. That kept inflation low, but also restricted growth. People wanted expansion, innovation, and credit, things that required money to move faster than mining could provide. Then came war. World War I shattered the illusion of stability. Governments needed money to build weapons, feed armies, and survive. They printed paper faster than they mined gold. For a few years, they ignored the gold standard. Inflation soared, debts grew, and by the end of the war, the world was drowning in paper promises that gold could no longer cover. In the 1920s, countries tried to return to the old system, but it didn't fit the new world. The US emerged as a financial giant, while Europe was broke and rebuilding. When the Great Depression hit, banks collapsed, unemployment exploded, and people lost faith in everything, including gold. In desperation, governments began breaking the rules. They confiscated gold, devalued currencies, and relied on paper to restart their economies. The gold standard was dying. Then another war came. And World War II changed the planet again, not just politically, but financially. Nations needed a new system that could rebuild economies without chaos. In 1944, world leaders met in a small town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. They built the blueprint for the modern monetary order. Here's how it worked. The US dollar would be linked directly to gold, 1 ounce of gold worth $35. Every other major currency would be linked to the dollar. That meant that even if your country didn't hold much gold, it could hold dollars, and those dollars could be exchanged for gold through the US Treasury. In short, the dollar became the new gold. For a while, it worked beautifully. The world rebuilt, trade boomed, and confidence returned. America's gold reserves in Fort Knox gave the world a sense of security. If you trusted the dollar, you trusted the system. But underneath the surface, the same old problem grew again. Wars, debt, and politics pushed nations to spend more than they earned. The United States printed more dollars to finance projects, support allies, and fight in Vietnam. Soon, there were more dollars circulating worldwide than gold to back them. Foreign governments noticed and started demanding gold in exchange for their dollars. The U.S. began to run out. Then, in 1971, President Richard Nixon made a decision that changed everything. He announced that the United States would no longer exchange dollars for gold. The gold window was closed. Overnight, the world left the gold standard and entered a new era, paper power. From that moment, money was no longer backed by metal. It was backed by confidence. The dollar remained strong because people believed in the American economy, not because gold sat behind it. This belief became the new foundation of finance. At first, people feared collapse. How could money exist without gold? But something surprising happened. The system kept working. Economies adjusted. Banks created money through lending. Governments managed inflation with policy instead of metal. The old anchor was gone, but the ship kept sailing. Still, gold didn't disappear. Central banks continued to hold it as a reserve, a last line of defense. Investors bought it whenever markets shook. It became a mirror of trust. When faith in paper fell, the price of gold rose. It was no longer money itself, but it remained the measure of money's health. The new paper world brought both freedom and danger. Money could now be created with a few keystrokes. Growth accelerated, but so did risk. Inflation, debt, and speculation became normal parts of modern life. Banks turned into creators of credit, and markets turned into machines of belief. People stopped asking, how much gold backs this? And started asking, how much profit does this make? In a strange way, the old logic never vanished. Gold had represented trust. Now numbers did the same. Where once we believed in the metal, now we believe in data, in GDP, stock indexes, and interest rates. Money transformed from substance into symbol. And yet, when crisis hits, everyone looks back. In 2008, when global markets crashed, investors rushed to buy gold again. During the pandemic, decades later, gold prices broke records. It's as if the world still remembers its oldest teacher, the one that never rusts, never lies, and never disappears. The gold standard may be gone, but the psychology of gold still rules the system. Even the US dollar, the so-called paper king, owes its power to the shadow of that golden past. Every promise of value still echoes the same ancient truth. Money is trust, and trust must be protected. The modern economy runs on numbers, not nuggets, but the principle is identical. A nation that loses trust loses everything. And trust, as history proves, is always built on something that feels unshakable. For 5,000 years, that symbol was gold. Today, it's the dollar. Tomorrow, who knows, but the pattern stays the same. Every age invents its own kind of gold, and every collapse begins when people stop believing in it. Today, most money doesn't exist at all, not physically. It's not in your wallet, not in a vault, not in gold bars. It lives in servers, apps, and screens. When you send money, you don't hand anything over. You just change numbers in a database, and somehow that's enough. This is the age of digital money, a world of code, networks, and invisible value. We swipe cards, scan phones, and make payments across continents in seconds. The world has never been richer, but also never more abstract. Money has become light, fast, untouchable, and endless. But if you look closely, behind every new form of money, there's an old shadow. The same logic that ruled ancient temples still rules modern banks. The same desire for trust that once made us worship gold now makes us worship data. Technology changed the form, but not the foundation. When the US left the gold standard in the 1970s, it freed money from metal, but it also unleashed uncertainty. Without gold, governments could print as much as they wanted. Inflation rose, recessions came and went, and people began to ask again, what gives money its real value? Then in 2008, the financial system cracked. Banks collapsed, markets panicked, and trillions vanished in days. People lost faith, not just in banks, but in the idea of money itself. That's when a new voice appeared, written in a white paper by someone named Satoshi Nakamoto. The title was simple, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Bitcoin promised something radical: money without banks, without governments, without borders. It was a digital form of gold, limited in supply, hard to fake, and protected by code, not kings. Instead of digging in the ground, miners now solved algorithms. Instead of vaults, there were blockchains. Digital ledgers open to everyone, owned by no one. At first, people laughed. Digital coins? Internet money? It sounded like a game. But slowly, the idea spread. Investors, technologists, even nations began to see that this new system wasn't a joke. It was a rebellion. A rebellion against the endless printing of paper, against inflation, and against the loss of trust. Bitcoin became known as digital gold, not just by accident. It followed the same rules that made gold sacred: scarcity, transparency, independence. Where gold was mined from earth, Bitcoin was mined from electricity. Where gold lived in vaults, Bitcoin lived in code. Both were born from belief, but the story didn't end there. After Bitcoin came thousands of cryptocurrencies, some useful, some scams, all experimental. They changed how we think about money. Suddenly, anyone could create a currency. Anyone could send value across the world in seconds without permission. Money was no longer national. It was digital. And yet, behind this revolution, something familiar returned. Governments started to collect gold again. Central banks increased their reserves quietly year after year. While the public chased digital coins, the institutions went back to the oldest symbol of safety: gold. Because when confidence shakes, the world always turns backward. China, Russia, and even Europe increased their gold holdings. Nations began talking about digital currencies backed by gold, blending the old and the new. A digital coin, yes, but with the weight of metal behind it. History, once again, repeating itself with new tools. Think about it. After thousands of years, gold still matters. It still decides policy, influences markets, and shapes how people feel about wealth. When the dollar weakens, gold rises. When inflation grows, people rush to buy it. In every crash, every panic, every storm, gold shines brighter. It's not about utility. It's about memory. Deep down, humans still trust what they can see, touch, and believe will never die. Even digital money copies gold's story. Scarcity equals trust. Mining equals work. Storage equals security. The code may be new, but the psychology is ancient. That's why gold remains the silent force of the financial system. It doesn't move every day, but it anchors everything that does. Behind every digital token, every central bank decision, every market panic, there's that old golden reflection. It's not about coins and vaults. It's about confidence in something timeless. But this new era also brings new paradoxes. We live in a time where one tweet can crash a market, where a company can print billions in digital tokens overnight, where virtual assets are worth more than physical cities. The world has moved from metal to data, but trust is still the currency. Lose trust and everything falls apart. Just like Rome, just like Spain, just like every empire before. Now, central banks are racing to build CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, digital dollars, euros, and yuan. They promise speed, control, and safety. But they also bring power. Total visibility of every transaction, every movement. Money is becoming not just digital, but traceable. And as we've learned throughout history, whoever controls money controls freedom. The question is, will digital money make us freer or more controlled? The answer depends on who you trust. A blockchain? A government? A handful of corporations? The players may change, but the game remains the same. The story of money is still the story of belief. And through it all, gold waits, unchanged, untouched, patient. It has seen every revolution. It outlived empires, kings, and currencies. And it's watching again, quietly, as humans reinvent the same system it started. When you see a gold coin, you're not just seeing metal. You're seeing 5,000 years of human memory. It's the first blockchain, the first currency, the first shared idea of value. And even now, in the digital age, we haven't escaped it. We've just given it new names. Bitcoin, dollar, crypto, token. But the story is the same. The hidden truth of money is this: we never left gold. We just changed the surface. The belief that built temples, empires, and banks still drives the code we write today, and that's why gold still rules, quietly, invisibly, eternally. Because in the end, money isn't about metal or machines. It's about faith. Faith that what we hold means something tomorrow. So the next time you look at a coin, a bill, or a glowing number on your phone, remember this: you are seeing history. The same story retold in a different language. The story of power, trust, and the shining metal that started it all. This is Histo Explains. What they built in the past still rules your future.